Hi everyone. In this video, I am going to show you the best features of my automated budget spreadsheet that is so easy to use and takes all the hard work out of budgeting. I will be uploading more videos in the next few weeks of how I built this spreadsheet so you can make it along with me. So press subscribe to get notified when I upload that. If you don't want to make it but you just want to use it, you can purchase the template at my Etsy link in the description. Before I go into the features of the spreadsheet, I'll give a brief overview of how I ended up deciding to make my own spreadsheet solution. 6 months ago, if you asked me to choose one word to describe how I felt about my finances, I would have said chaotic. I kept trying to save money, but every month I would have some sort of expense come up that I wasn't expecting, and it would wipe out what little I had left, and I was constantly scraping by paycheck to paycheck. But the thing is, the expenses that were coming up weren't emergencies. They were routine things that I should have been able to predict. Expenses like car registration that happens every year, or a student loan payment that happens every 3 months. So I knew that if I wanted to escape the cycle of feeling anxious and frustrated about my finances, I needed to get organized. The available tools I found either required a monthly fee that I didn't want to pay, or they required too much data entry and I wasn't able to commit to that solution. So I began the daunting task of creating my own spreadsheet. I knew that what I needed to help myself long term was a completely automated spreadsheet that required as little work to use it as possible. And after several months of work, I finally have a product that is helping me feel like I actually know what to expect with my money, and it's taking out all of the uncertainty that I had before. Now, I'm able to set realistic goals for myself and achieve them. It has been completely transformative for me in a comparatively short amount of time, and I want to make it available to others in case it can help more people who were struggling like I was. So if you have ever felt like you needed a financial management solution with a low effort to high reward ratio, check out the key features of my simple, automated budget spreadsheet that I'll share with you in this video. There are 3 key features of this spreadsheet, and they all have to do with what this spreadsheet can automate for you. My whole goal is that you do as little data entry as possible so the spreadsheet can take your initial settings and just auto-generate your future income and expenses. Let's dive into it. Key feature number 1, the income recording. When you make your income selections, the numbers of pay periods per month as well as the total income per month in rows 7 through 17 are automatically generated. You only have to input your income settings once, and then it automatically updates for every month moving forward. You can put in monthly, every 2 weeks, or weekly pay. And you can do this for up to 3 sources of static income. Income that is always the same amount and is on a predictable schedule. The best part is you do not have to change the month yourself. Column E always starts on the current month, so each month, row 7 updates and the whole timeline shifts over. So next month, in December, cell E7 will automatically update to December 2024, and all the rows below in the dashboard for income, expenses, and savings will also shift over appropriately. But what if you have income that is not predictable? You can unhide these 10 rows to input up to 10 dynamic sources of income. You can do the same thing for expenses and savings. So let's say, maybe in certain months, I make more on my side gig than other months. I can put in those estimated numbers here, and even though they're not formulas, even though I typed these numbers in, these will also still shift over at the start of the new month. There's a script running that will do that for you, so I'll do a manual push of the script now to show you what will happen. So there, you see all the numbers I typed shifted over, and I can continue putting in dynamic income in the next future month. But this will happen automatically at the start of each month. You will not have to shift over your data yourself. Alright, so that's how income recording works. Now let's take a closer look at how the spreadsheet tracks your expenses automatically. Again, this is all automated, so my goal is you only have to input your expenses one time, and the spreadsheet does all the future tracking and predicting for you. So I'll put some example transactions in my monthly and variable expenses tables. The green table is for my monthly expenses, like rent. It happens every month, and it's always the same. The purple table is for variable expenses, things I do spend money on every month or most months, but it's not as predictable.
like groceries or pet supplies or my hobbies. And you can see when I add these expenses to these tables, rows 30 and 31 in the dashboard are automatically updating to show you how much you expect to pay each month for those expenses. If you're unsure how much you should budget for a variable expense, I have a tip coming up for that later in the video. In addition to monthly and variable expenses, we also have recurring expenses that do keep happening, but not necessarily every month. For these, we will use the magenta and orange tables, and I'll show you the difference between them. When I put some recurring transactions in this magenta table, and this is key feature number 2 of this spreadsheet, it's going to automatically populate the next year of future occurrences on the calendar tab. Look what happens when I change the frequency of this car registration entry. The calendar automatically updates. You do not have to plot out dates of expenses on a calendar yourself. The spreadsheet automatically does it for you. And you can even input any amount of weeks or months that the transactions recurs for. So if it's an annual transaction, you just put monthly 12. For biannual, you put monthly 6. For a weekly basis, for example, you could put every 7 weeks, so just put weekly 7. But really, you can enter any number in the duration column, and the table will handle the prediction of future occurrences. The first date column can also be from many years ago. It does not have to be recent, so this is a long-term solution. That's what the magenta table does, but what does the orange table do? The orange table and the magenta table are the same, except for one thing. The only difference is the magenta one populates the calendar and the orange one does not. So if I have some recurring expenses that I don't want to populate on the calendar, I'll put them in the orange table. So now I've got my recurring expenses and some standard monthly and estimated variable expenses populated. Let's take a look back at the monthly dashboard. There are a few options here. I can either track my expenses based on the actual months they occur in, because some will not be every month, so I would choose true, and see the amount of my expenses change every month because it's going based off of the scheduled occurrences of the magenta and orange table transactions. Now, even though the orange table does not populate the calendar, those amounts are included here in row 29. If we compare a month from the calendar to a month in this row, look, the total amounts are different because the calendar does not include orange table expenses, but the dashboard does. But let's say instead, I would like to just know how much I have to save each month in order to be able to pay all of my recurring expenses all year long. Instead of budgeting by when they actually happen, I'm just going to save enough money ahead of time each month so that when those big ones pop up later, I know I already put enough aside to cover them. In that case, I would choose average in row 29, and it's adding together the amount to save per month column from both the magenta table and the orange table. And you can always toggle in between these budgeting method options. You're not locked into just one. You can also choose your method for saving here. Let's say I want to save a standard amount each month. I'll put that amount in I2. It auto-populates for every month. But maybe instead, I want to decide each month how much I'll save and change that amount dynamically. So again, I can expand these rows for dynamic input, and at the beginning of each month, they will shift over when the timeline moves. I can use a combination of the two, an entry in I2 and dynamic entries. Or finally, I can also choose allocate all unbudgeted to savings. So what this will do is take any amount I would have had left over, and instead of leaving it as unbudgeted, it just automatically puts it towards savings. The final table on this page is the gray one at the bottom, and this is where you could enter scheduled transfers between your bank accounts or enter standard paycheck information, and later in the video, I'll show you why you would do that. So now we've covered all the aspects of the dashboard and the budget items tab, so it's on to the transactions log tab. Here you can see the balances of all of your bank accounts that you want to track. As long as you keep entering your transactions, they'll be accurately up to date. You can also see an abbreviated version of the calendar tab in this table right here, as well as a graph of the budget amounts left in each of your categories. So as you spend money each month, the amounts left in each category will decrease, and you'll see the graph update. And I put that all on the transactions tab because each time I spend my money, I want to be keeping all of this in mind, so I'm making good choices with my money and not spending unnecessarily. But the real goldmine of this tab, and this is key feature number 3, is look what happens when I make a choice from the description drop down for my transactions. The rest of the cells autofill with the settings I have already input on my budget items tab. So you don't have to fill it out every time. Prior to making this spreadsheet, this was the number one thing that was preventing me from consistently tracking all of my transactions. I simply didn't want to think about how to categorize everything every single time, especially when I was making repetitive purchases that really should have the same settings. Now it's actually fun for me to enter transactions. Just choose from the drop down and look at how satisfying that is. It's like, yeah, I do know where my money is going. And even better, you can do this from your phone. So you finish checking out at the grocery store, you take 5 seconds to pull out your phone and choose the drop down, enter a dollar amount, and you're done with your tracking, all good to go. Okay, but let's say maybe this autofills and then I decide, you know what, actually, usually when I buy groceries, it's something I need, and that's the setting I have saved on my budget tab, but this time I splurged a little, so this transaction I really should categorize as a want. I can still make that change here. You're not locked into the settings that get pulled in from your budget items tab. You can also change your budget items tab settings anytime, but from here you can start with your defaults and then make any changes as you see fit for each individual case. Remember the gray table from the budget items tab? This is where that comes in handy. I can just choose paycheck from that table and it automatically fills in those income settings. So that's how simple it is to use the transactions table. But of course, what good would it be if we didn't analyze the data that we collect in it? So this spreadsheet also has a reports tab, and this is where it all comes together to show you your spending habits. So it uses standard 50-30-20 charts, where you try to spend 50% of your income on things you need, 30% on things you want, and put 20% into savings. But what's special here is that I'm not just tracking my 50-30-20 habits for the current month. I can actually compare my current month habits to my all-time average habits to see my long-term trends. And in addition, there's one more 50-30-20 chart where I can choose any specific past month I want to compare as well. The other part of the Reports tab is the pivot table, which shows your monthly spending and amounts by category. So you can really analyze over time and see, oh, it looks like in this one month I spent way more in a certain category than I usually do. I should investigate that. Well, I can double click to drill down and it automatically creates this other tab that shows you just the transactions that are adding up to that amount. When you're done looking at the drill down, you can just hit the convenient delete button that pops up, or you can right click and delete the tab later. What's great about this pivot table too is when I add transactions in a new month on the transactions table, the pivot table automatically adds the new column for the new month that was added. But if you start running out of space, let's say you use the spreadsheet for several years, you can just start hiding some of the older month columns, and you can insert more columns so more months can populate as time goes on. But even if you hide older columns, the total category amount here will still include the hidden months. And finally, you can use these columns to the left of the pivot table to guide your budgeting decisions. So these are formulas that are telling you how much you have budgeted on average for each category per month, and how much on average you actually spend in each category per month. So again, this is based on that average to save per month column in the magenta and orange tables, and then just the total amount columns from the purple and green tables. But as you enter your transactions, your spending over time should average out to be what you've budgeted for the recurring transactions. But what if they don't? What if I have misbudgeted? Well, I can adjust my variance tolerance level here to change which cells are highlighted. So if I enter 200, then that means any cells that are less than negative 200, in other words, I am spending $200 or more dollars more than what I budgeted per month, they'll be highlighted in red. And any cells that are more than positive 200, meaning I am spending 200 or more less dollars than what I had budgeted, then those cells will be highlighted green to show me I'm not going over my budget in those areas. But I can change my tolerance level. Let's say I want a variance of only $50. I can just input that here to update. So for me, what I did was when I first started using this spreadsheet, I actually did not have any amounts filled in my variable expenses budget table. I put in the types of transactions I would make: groceries, pet expenses, hobbies, but I didn't actually have any amounts in there until after I used this spreadsheet for about 4 months. Then what I did was I looked at this column, and by then I had a pretty good idea of how much I was spending on average in those areas. So then I was able to go back and put those amounts in the variable expenses table. So now I have an idea of what I should be aiming for to be reasonable for my spending habits. Or I can try to challenge myself and be a bit more conservative and not spend as much next month in one of those categories. Now that we've gone through the final tab, there is one more bonus feature of this spreadsheet that I didn't mention. It's the buttons on the budget items tab. Did you notice those? I'll save the deep dive on those for another video, but as you can see, you can use them to change transaction description names or category names, and they even make the change retroactively to all of the transactions you have already logged. But that's enough for this video. I would love to know, which feature did you find most exciting? Leave a comment to let me know. If you want to build a spreadsheet with me, subscribe to get notified of my next video where I'll take you through step by step how I did it. From designing and formatting the tabs to writing the formulas and scripts, I'll walk you through all of it. And of course, if you prefer to skip the hard work, the template can be purchased at my Etsy link in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you are inspired to take actionable steps to gain confidence over your own budget. I know that you can.